To most people, they think of the word diabetes after eating too much sugar. To some, they think of diabetes and then they think of body parts like the pancreas. But to one 16-year-old high school athlete, who just so happens to be my little brother, diabetes is his way of life.
My name's Andrew Trammell. I have type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed with it in May of 2014, 8 years ago. It affects me by having to check my blood sugar every day and taking shots for each or however many carbs I eat per day.
As I mentioned before, Andrew is a high school athlete. He is on his high school's football team as well as the lacrosse team. I talked to him about how diabetes affects him while playing sports.
It doesn't really affect me unless it drops, and I have to go and check it and sit out for a little bit and wait for it to come up, eat something, and I just check it every day before practice and tell my trainer.
I spoke with Andrew's trainer about him working with athletes who have type 1 diabetes and how he handles that pressure every day.
Brian Tootin. I'm an athletic trainer here at BC, and I wanted to be in sports medicine, but work with high school athletes and be outside, not in a clinic.
So, what does your typical day look like in your role?
Typical day changes by the day. I usually get here mid to early morning, so say between 8 and 9 o'clock. On most days, if it's a practice day. If it's game day, I may come in same time. I may come in a little bit later, just depending. So I take care of kind of the kids during the day. We'll either rehab in here. If somebody's sick, I'll have to deal with that too. So I do all COVID-related issues as well. And then after school, we do rehab for athletes. We cover our sports here on campus and take care of any injuries that go with that.
How many students do you take care of that have type 1 diabetes? And out of those students, how many are athletes?
So I have 3 on campus that have type 1. 2 are actually on the football team. The third does athletics in the spring, but not a major sport that usually has complications with diabetes. For them, they have to pay attention to what they're eating and what they're putting into their bodies. Do they eat the sugary desserts at lunch? If they do, they have to pay attention even more. Some of them take their blood sugar themselves. Others, it's done through the new stuff that goes straight to their phone and stuff like that. So it makes it easier for some of them on that side. Giving themselves insulin, usually they don't have to do it quite as much as they used to with the newer technology. So it has gotten easier on them, but they still have to pay attention to how they feel. They have to pay attention to what they're putting into their body. They need snacks throughout the day instead of just eating 2 or 3 meals like most try to get away with. And there's no way it's easy for a kid this age.
What is your protocol for treating a student with a low blood sugar or high blood sugar?
The first thing we look for is, see what their doctor wants, number one, which most of them go to the same physician around here anyway. So that makes it really easy. So their protocols and what they want for each athlete is roughly the same. So when we hit a threshold, and it's usually between, say, 240, 250 or so on the high side, and anything for a diabetic, for me, under 100 when they're exercising and stuff is kind of the red flag. We'll pull them out of exercise. So that's the number one thing. And then we monitor and see where it's going. Is it too low? Are we still going high? And most of your technology nowadays will show them where it's going and what it's doing. They also know how they feel. Most of the athletes, they'll come to me and say, hey, my mouth's dry. Hey, I think I'm getting higher. I can tell it's going up. I'm going to go check. So different things like that. They'll start getting low of energy. Some will get a little bit pale. They can kind of tell themselves. They'll pull out. We'll check and go from there.
So that's, you answered my fifth question also, the signs to look for when an athlete is playing. No, that's okay. When an athlete is playing in a game or, on the field, on the court, whatever, to indicate that they have an abnormal blood sugar.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it falls on the athlete themselves. I mean, they know what triggers their body and what to look for themselves and how they're going to feel. So a lot of it's put on them, and they do a very good job with it. We do make sure at the beginning of exercise we ask what their numbers are at. If they've had trouble for 2 or 3 days, we make sure they go check it at certain periods throughout. If they're doing great and they have been controlling it great, we go off of how they're feeling. We'll monitor it at the end if they've had issues during the play. Some of them drive, some of them do other things, so we want to make sure they get home okay. And then we'll let parents know if there's a huge issue.
I also wanted to sit down and talk about how having a relative with type 1 diabetes has affected not only me, but the rest of our family as well. I still remember vividly the weeks leading up to Andrew's diagnosis with type 1 diabetes. My family and I had gone on vacation, and one of those days on vacation, we decided to go to a NASCAR race, and we went to dinner before the race started. We had gone to Olive Garden, and after our meal was over, my brother, he started to feel sick, almost like he had a carb overload. He ate too many carbs. We didn't really think anything of it at the time, but as the night went on, he acted really tired and actually fell asleep during the race, which was odd because it was a race. There was a lot of noise. So after our vacation was over, we went back home and his baseball season had started. So it had been a couple of weeks, and this one week in particular, the week actually leading up to him being diagnosed, he started to act not like himself. He he was hungry all the time. He was thirsty all the time. He had all the symptoms of a type 1 diabetic. He wet the bed. He wasn't a bedwetter, but he had wet the bed several times. Really, anywhere he fell asleep, he would wet the car, the couch, his bed. He couldn't help it. It was something that his body wasn't used to, and he just couldn't help it. So the night before my mom took him to the doctor, he started to get really sick, and he asked my mom for some chocolate milk. So she went to the store and got him some chocolate milk, and he started to drink it, and he actually got sick. He vomited. So my mom and my dad had a discussion, and they took him to our doctor the next day. So when my mom got to the doctor could look at my brother and tell that he was a type 1 diabetic. So he told my mom to get in the car and go straight to the hospital. So that's what they did. They went to the hospital, and Andrew was admitted right then and there. He was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days. I think it was 3 because it was over a weekend that he was in there, Friday to Sunday. So 2 to 3 days. He had been in the hospital, and the nurse or the doctor, I guess, said that when he was admitted, his blood sugar was over 800, astronomically high. So I remember, I guess it was either the second day he was in there or the last day he was in the hospital, a diabetic specialist actually got together with my family, my parents, me, my grandparents, anyone who took care of Andrew or looked after Andrew. She got us all together and actually kind of gave us insight on diabetes and how to handle it, how we as relatives to Andrew could handle it. So that looking back on it now, I think I was just as confused as Andrew was. I didn't know anyone who had any type of diabetes, let alone my brother having type 1 diabetes. That was the first encounter, I guess, of someone with type 1 diabetes. And I think I was just as confused as him when he was diagnosed with it, because I had no idea what it was, like I said. And so now I have a vast understanding of what it is. And I'm glad I do, because it's not just about watching what you eat or how much sugar intake you have. It's so many different components, and I'm just glad that I educated myself on it, and I am now able to help other people understand what it is, and it's not just a word that you use when you eat too much sugar or candy or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have diabetes now. It's way much more than that. So yeah. Type 1 diabetes affects mainly children. They typically are diagnosed from ages 4 to 14, but can be diagnosed anytime in their adolescent years. On occasion, adults can also be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes if they have endured an illness that gave them a virus. That virus then can attack the pancreas, therefore causing type 1 diabetes. That is how my brother Andrew came to have type 1 diabetes, even though he was diagnosed as a child. Many people won't know that they have type 1 diabetes until they get too sick. The symptoms that I described Andrew having are usually the telltale signs that someone has type 1 diabetes. Many people don't know about the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes occurs in adults who are typically obese or do not eat healthy. This can be serious, as it can lead to even more detrimental illnesses over time. If you or someone you know is sick and experiencing the symptoms of diabetes, don't hesitate to go to a doctor. November is American Diabetes Month. For more information on diabetes, go to the American Diabetes Association website. I am really glad you took the time to watch this and also educate yourself on type 1 diabetes.